I did get the chance to talk to a friend about. I mentioned I think the Garden of Eden was located in Israel, Jerusalem,
Yeah.
and he said well, of course he was like, no, I don't think so, and he said that, well, didn't the garden have to be between the Tigris and the Euphrates? Um,
Uh-huh.
so what kind of, I guess, rebuttal would you say to that?
You want to talk about the four rivers?
Sure, we can talk about the
All
four
right.
rivers, because it seems like those rivers, I think, give the location of the or the most likely location of the garden. And if you were to kind of look at those four rivers differently, or however you would sort those, and show like actually the garden could have been in Israel, I think I think that turned a lot of heads in a good way. And you know, I think you're refuting, or what should I say? I think that's something that needs to be cleared up, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that the four rivers is really the main passage people use to try to find Eden. And that's why everyone puts it in the wrong spot. Let me see here. Well, it's Genesis 2:10-14.
And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became into four heads. The name of the first is Pison. That is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium, and the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is it which goeth toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates.
So what's important to understand here is when people read this, they picture this as a river running through the garden, and once it gets outside, due to gravity and topography, it splits immediately into the origins of four different rivers that run on off in different directions. That's what people picture when they read this. And that's just not really what it's saying. What it's saying is that a river went out of Eden to water the garden. This is very similar to something that will occur during the millennium. In Ezekiel's prophecy, he talks about a river that runs from the temple all the way out to the Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea becomes a living sea. Okay? And there's fruit trees on either side of this river as it runs down to the Dead Sea. And we actually know which river's being talked about. It begins at the Gihon Spring, and that water goes down to the Kedron Valley, and it's a brook that it says Jesus crossed over this brook and entered an olive garden, I think in John. It mentions Jesus crossing the Kedron brook before he went into the garden to pray before the crucifixion. But that brook there, that would be this river that ran out of Eden, though. So it goes all the way from Jerusalem and winds through the land and dumps out into the Dead Sea. And that would be out of Eden at that point.
And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became into four heads.
And from thence it was parted and became into four heads. The important thing here is to look at the word translated parted. And what you can do on Blue Letter Bible is go to that word parted. From thence it was parted. And look at how that word is used in other Bible verses. And what you'll see is that it means something is scattered or dispersed. Let me see if I can give a few good examples. Well, I mean, the word is used there in Genesis 10, talking about people dispersing to different locations. The isles of the Gentiles divided. So the nations divided uses the word in a similar way. Let's see. Genesis 13:9 is when Abraham and Lot are talking. And Abraham says, "Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. If thou depart to the right hand, I will go to the left." When he says separate thyself, it's using that word. Then Lot chose him all the plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves, the one from the other. And I should, since I'm recording, I should scroll through all these. I don't want to get outside of the Pentateuch. Let's see. Some examples are better than others. But what you can see is it doesn't really mean a river splitting. And this will become more clear in just a moment when I get into the identity of the rivers. But it's important to understand that from thence it was parted, it was dispersed, divided, or scattered.
And there's also Deuteronomy 32, when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam. Goodness, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel.
Yeah. So it's a word that it doesn't have to mean the river is splitting. It can mean something else. It can mean something supernatural. But here's where it becomes more clear. You know, some people might hear me saying that and be like, nah, I don't buy that. You know, it's like, well, maybe you will once you consider the rest of this, because the first thing to understand is that parted means dispersed or scattered. And here's the second thing. It says, and became into 4 heads. Look at how the word heads is used elsewhere in the Pentateuch. Other Bible verses using the word, and it's important. You'll hear people flip to a concordance, read the word definition, and then pick something they want it to mean. And that's maybe not the best way of doing things, but to see how it's actually used in verses, to look through the verses that utilize the word. That's the way you want to do it. But this word heads, you'll notice in Genesis 8:5, it says, on the first day of the month were the tops of the mountains seen. The tops. That word is translated the tops, the mountain peaks. And in Genesis 11:4, they say, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. The tower top is using this same Hebrew word. And so forth. But I think it's real interesting in Genesis 8:5, it's using it to refer to mountaintops. And that's essentially the same meaning in Genesis 2:10. From thence it was parted and became into 4 headwaters. The mountain peaks, see, and the fact that there's 4 of them means these are 4 origins of rivers. there's not just one head with 4 rivers here. There's 4 heads. And people have not noticed that. These are 4 distinct river sources.
Oh, I see. See, reading the at least the ESV, I sure heck would have not figured that out because it says like there it divided and became 4 rivers.
Yeah,
So like
that's...
so I think this river flowed out of Eden, this one river, and then it divided into 4 rivers. It broke off, I guess, twice or something. That's the way like I would read it, which is not the way that should be read.
Well, that's the way a lot of people read it. They're reading it in a real sort of natural way, material way. What's the word I'm looking for? They're not seeing the supernatural thing being described. You know, it's not, what I'm describing is really sort of a miraculous sort of thing, you know, but people read it and think, oh, it's just the river parting into 4, you know.
Yeah.
But we know that's not it, because there's 4 heads of rivers, 4 source waters, 4 headwaters for rivers. And the other thing about this is we know what these 4 rivers were. And people kind of struggle to identify these rivers. And again, it's because they're not quite looking, they're not looking at it the right way. They know what 2 of the rivers are, the Euphrates and the Tigris. What's the name given to the Tigris in Genesis 2? It's a name that is used elsewhere of the Tigris. Let me see.
Hiddekel?
Yeah, Hiddekel. Let's see.
And the name of the 3rd river is Hiddekel. That it is it which goeth towards the east of Assyria, and the 4th river is Euphrates.
Yeah, now that Hiddekel in Daniel 10:4, Daniel says, and in the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel. Well, he's talking about the Tigris, you know.
Yeah.
And scholars know that. And so we have a biblical definition of the Hiddekel as the Tigris. I thought there was another verse that actually called it the Tigris. Oh, Tigris is the Greek. I'll bet you in the Septuagint it's a Tigris. Well, we know that we know what these rivers were. That's the thing. You'll hear people saying we know the Euphrates and Tigris, but these other 2 are unknown. Well, I have a theory that the 4 rivers in Genesis 2 are referring to the 4 rivers that watered the whole known world in Second Temple Jewish thought. Okay? And these 4 rivers are the 4 essential rivers of the world in the Book of Jubilees and in the Genesis Apocryphon. I have a map that shows this, and I'll put it on the screen.
Yeah, I think for something like this, a good map would definitely do justice to show people where like these 4 origins were. It really doesn't make sense for the same word to mean top, and then usually a mountain, as gravity naturally does, would be the source, you know, of some sort of river.
Yeah.
Water flows down some sort of gradient, and with kind of a watershed essentially, and then it flows into some sort of common or some sort of river. So when you look at it that way, it just seems, yeah, that these 4 rivers start at some sort of top or some 4 different origins. So
Yeah. 4 headwaters means 4 distinct rivers. And And when you understand that, you know what parted means, you know. The Gihon, we are just sure that that's the Nile because that's how it's identified in this ancient Jewish writing, the Jubilees, Genesis Apocryphon, stuff like that. So we know what the Gihon is. It's the Nile. Now, the ancient world knew that the Nile did not come from the same source waters as the Tigris and the Euphrates. Some scholars speculate that those rivers may seem to come from the same source, and they're up in the mountains, and ancients didn't really journey up in the mountains much. It was dangerous. And so mountaintops were really a source of a lot of wonder and unknown in the ancient world. And they think maybe the ancients speculated these rivers came from one source. And I would say that's just too much speculation from the scholars. I don't think these ancients were stupid. They sure knew that the Nile didn't come from that source. Well, the fourth river it's the Don River today. And it flows into the Black Sea. It goes northward up into the European continent. So, but those are the four rivers of Genesis 2. And, you know,
So essentially, this passage is not trying to say where like the garden was. What it's trying to do is provide it has a supernatural significance. You say?
yeah,